Welcome to Toffee TV. We've got Alan Myers in the studio. You all know Alan. He's a legend on Twitter. If you're on Twitter, he's on there all the time. And when he was at Everton, you were never offered, Al. I don't know how you maintained any kind of relationship with any family member when you were at Everton. But we'll talk about that later. Just tell us, Al. How did you start to get into the media game? How did that become?
Well, it was a long time ago actually. I always wanted. I had a mobile disco when I was young. Believe it or not, you know.
I'll believe it.
Fancy that disco. It was called. It's how I met my wife. But I always liked broadcasting, you know, communication. It was just something which I liked. And Radio Merseyside at the time used to have the Sunday football. Sunday soccer it was called. And then I got a part-time job. Charles Lambert, of all people, gave me a part-time job to go out and not commentate, but, you know, report on. I'll never forget my first ever phone report. I sat at home and listened to it on a Sunday afternoon, and to hear me on the phone, you know, I was rubbish, you know, at the time. Some would suggest I am now, but it was fantastic, and it was a real good grounding because, you know, you'd go and do proper football, you know, the oyster against the lobster, you know, and all these teams and the Sunday Cup, Almaside, I remember, I saw a great game against them at South Liverpool's ground, you know, in the Cup against a team called Sunderland, Humbledon playing, and there was a big kick-off in the stands. It was really funny, but no, I started on that, and then I did that voluntary, and then I got a job full time at Radio Merseyside in the sports, doing the sport and the breakfast show. And then I got a phone call from Everton at the time, Cliff Finch, who said, we'd like you to come and join Everton, you know. And I said, well, you can give me about 4 seconds to decide. I'll think about it, you know. So, and then the rest after that is, you know, is history, as they say.
So, you know, I mean, there's been so many massive changes, but I mean, what was it like going in at Everton in those days? What did the job entail in those days?
Well, I was the first ever named Premier League press officer. There was not anyone called press officer at the time. There was loads of people doing the job, so in effect it was, you know, but to actually be named on a club programme as press officer, it just didn't happen because media had changed by then, you know. Things were, you know, but we had the what we call at the time, and if they do watch this they'll laugh, but we had what we call the mafia, the Merseyside mafia in the print, you know, business at the time. And it was off the top of my head I can't think of the names, but there was a group of journos who pretty much ran the show. You know, it didn't happen to anyone else. They had it first, you know. And it was tough because I was coming in with all this newfangled internet stuff, and you know, we're going to have this thing called a website, and we're going to have Club Call, and we're going to have
Club Call. Don't mention Club Call.
Okay, well, Club Call was 50 pence a minute.
It was. My mum is well aware of that.
So mine.
Well, I think there are a few mums well aware of it, but I'll never forget the best ever headline we had was, well, there were two actually. The first one was Boss on Speed, which was, you know, God rest his soul, Gary Speed, the manager. He left under a little bit of a cloud, didn't he? You know, and Howard Kendall spoke with me at the time, and that was a big day on Club Call. And the other one was Duncan Ferguson's. Well, actually, I never forget that we had a headline that said "Chairman speaks," you know, and Peter Johnson rang me up and he said, people think I've been moot, you know. He said, what are you putting that up for? I said, well, you know, it, metaphorically speaking, you know, you speak out. So, but the other one was like, and again, thankful to the man we all remember today, Howard Kendall. He said to me, you want an interview with Duncan? He said, I've made him captain, come and do it. So he went up to his office in Belfield, and we interviewed him, and we think we did an interview for 39 seconds, I think it was, 40 seconds. All Duncan said was, I'm proud and privileged to be captain of this club, and that was it. That was the interview. And we made more money that day on Club Call than any other day, you know.
Funny enough, I remember when we sold Duncan to Newcastle, and there was nothing on the Everton Club Call. So I rung the Newcastle Club Call, and they were confirming he'd signed. It was.
Well, do you want me to tell you a story about that? Just quickly, you know, and this is why you'll have to stop me from doing this, or you know, during this. But the night Duncan was sold, I went to the secretary. There was a lot of press, like, you know, Duncan Ferguson going to Newcastle. We were playing Newcastle that night, and he said, you know, so I said to Michael Dunford, I said, Michael, I said, is Is this true? Oh, yeah. Absolute rubbish, Mr. Myers, he said to me, because, of course, in them days, you didn't say, when it was... So I went up to the press lounge and I said to the press, no, it's absolute nonsense, because that's what I was told.
Yeah.
And on the way down, if anyone knows Goodison, there's a chairman's office on the first floor. It's just a little tiny little office where on a match day a chairman would go in there, and I see the door open and it's never open, and I thought, I'll close that, because there's papers or whatever in there. So when I went to close the door, looked in, there was someone in there, and I looked in, it was Ruud Hullett and Duncan Ferguson signing the contract.
Ooh.
And I thought, oh no, what do I do here? So I knew it was going to happen. And the next minute he went in a car. If anyone ever remembers that, he was taking out the thing and went in a car. And the next morning at Belfield, with a young lady who came in and parked herself in reception in Belfield and wouldn't move until we signed Duncan back. And I thought, well, you're going to be there for a while, I think. Just even the paperwork will keep you here for a couple of days.
That's my wife.
Yeah, but those days, and I always remember people saying, how can you cope? But that's the way it was in football. It was difficult, and it's not a criticism of Michael. He had his job to do, and he had to protect the story, until the player was signed, he wasn't signed, so it was no good doing that if it didn't happen, and all of a sudden, we caused all this hassle. So they were just the trials and tribulations, I think, of a press.
Is there anyone you particularly blame for Duncan leaving the club?
No, I think you're probably thinking Peter Johnson, but I don't think it was really. I think there was a time when I think he was really the most saleable asset, and I think we had to do it if we wanted to do. I don't think Duncan wanted to go, but if he didn't want to go, he could have said no, I suppose. But it's one of those. I'll never forget it, because the next day we had an actual board meeting over at Park Foods the next day, and I went with Walter over to there, and I remember because. I went in with one, and about 5 or 10 minutes later, Peter Johnson came out, and we went back to his house because he lived on the Wirral at the time, and he said we waited, and he came down after about 4 hours back into the. I just sat in his living room for 4 hours just waiting, and he came down.
Nigel Mann wasn't with you, was he?
No, he wasn't. No, and he said to me. He said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Oh, this is bad, Chairman. This one, this is we're going to get a lot of stick on this one, And he said, "Right, I'm off to Jersey," and he flew to Jersey that afternoon. And I think after that the club was sold, and I don't think he came back after that. Because there was a funny story, because I actually got on quite well with Peter Johnson. He had a good sense of humour, actually, Peter. And he told me one day, months later, when he said he met the Ferry, in Jersey. He said he always used to go down and get an Echo sent. He had a Liverpool Echo, always sent to his house in Jersey. And I used to go and pick it up, he said, from the ship, from the boat that come over. He said, and this fella, it's a Scouser, who was taking the stuff off the ship and putting it on the side. He said, and there was a big picture of me on the back page. He said, and I had this deerstalker hat on and everything. He said, and this fella said, "See this fella?" I won't use the language. He said, "But see this something?" He said, "He lives on this island somewhere." He said, and I just went, and just took the paper and went. He said, it was me. And I thought, brilliant. And he did have that sense of humour, at the time, Peter. I know he got a lot of stick at the time, but I actually quite liked him. And there were times when he would communicate with me probably first before other people he should have probably communicated with. But now, and there, we were talking before about Radio Everton and TV Everton, and there was a lot of innovative ideas at the time, with Everton. It really, there were a lot of good ideas, but it's like anything, isn't it? If it's not successful on the pitch,
I loved Radio Everton, apart from the fact that you had to position. I could only listen to it in my dad's car outside the house. And it was, but that was a really. How did something like that come about?
Well, it was just it was Cliff Finch actually, and as I say, had some really good ideas. In fairness to him, and we did a lot of good things at the time. TV Everton was very sort of, not like this, but it was very sort of
not
basic.
Like this.
No, but it was very basic and very, sort of, we were just doing things as we went along, really, and.
I remember your little room off the tunnel.
That's right. Yeah, we had.
I was working there at the time.
But we had good little things. Neville Southall was brilliant to us. He'd come in and do a little show with Andrew Lansell, and and all these little phone-ins. But I remember Joe Royal was never a big fan, because he didn't like phone-ins. He'd do a lot of stuff with just interviews and stuff, but he never liked phone-ins. because I think his argument was anyone can ring. You don't have to be a supporter of the club to ring in on a phone in, which is, is a point really. But it was a time when, as I say, there were a lot of things just changing in the world. The media was very different. It was nothing like it was now. And I used to do, me and Mark Rowan at the time, we used to do the internet. I keep saying that.
Internet.
How old am I?
Officially
the website,
invented.
the officially internet. No, we used to do the website. We used to do Club Call. We used to do the program. We used to do the match day. Operation. We used to do everything basically. And you think now about when you look at clubs now. I mean, it's a different. Don't get me wrong. It's a different world now, and you couldn't do it with that little amount of people. But it was fun. We had some times. We had some moments.
Because you talk about I think the radio station should come back. I've said it. I've told the club myself. I think it's such a really tool. And now, then it was so, because there was all these, when Peter Johnson came, there was all these ideas at once, wasn't there? There was like the radio station. There was those the not monthly but bi-monthly cassette VHSs you could buy, and
Duncan
interview in it, and they were brilliant. They were sort of completely new. There was the likes of the Everton magazine, all these new sources of communication, which obviously now you can get from one simple place. But I still think
foresight that
I still think there's a place for these things.
100%.
Especially like the radio station, because the radio station would be dead easy now.
Of course it would.
Obviously you'd have to get certain bits licenses.
There are issues with that.
But you can,
you can do it.
You can do it, and it's and I think things like that were so far ahead of the time that maybe people look back and go, that's old-fashioned. But actually,
but I think that's the problem. You're right, because I think people think they have to move on from those things, but that's not necessarily the case. If something's good and it works, do it.
And it builds that match day experience.
Of course it does, absolutely. And we had some. We did some great things. Some of the programs we used to have, and some of the interviews and stuff we used to do. It was, as you say, it was very innovative at the time. And no other clubs. They used to ring Everton. It was typical Everton, isn't it? Because we always do the first. But they used to ring us to ask our advice about radio stations. I think it was only Manchester United who had one as well as us at the time.
Yeah. Don't know why they got rid of it. Need to bring it back.
Yeah, but yeah, that it was very basic. The media department was very, very small, and it was the program writing, and we had to do it all. Well, we had a guy in Widnes actually called Frank who was great at the time. Used to do the program, but it was very much a new thing, and football was very new at the time.
Have you got? Is there one thing that sticks out from your first spell at the club?
How many do you want? I had I think it was 4 managers. I had we had Gaza. Gaza was become 50% of my life. At that point.
I remember you brought him when we signed. You brought him in a ticket office, and he was shaking like.
Well, the thing when he signed, I got a phone call off Walter, and he said, "Al, I need you to just go downstairs and meet someone." I said, "Okay." He said he's sitting in his car. So I come out of the park end and I turn around, and there was a Range Rover parked just by where the gates are. Where the players' entrance is now. And there he was, sat there. And I looked and I said, "Oh God, it's Gaza, So and I knew he was signing, but I didn't think he'd be sitting in the car, So he sat there, and he was absolutely terrified. Yeah. You're right, he was. And he says to me, I said, "Paul, it's Alan Myers." So he said, "Alan Myers," and he called me Myers from that day onwards, and he made me known as Myers in Sky, because of the way it was. And I said, "You okay?" He says, "Yeah." He goes, "Do me a favour." And I said, "What's that?" He goes, "Go and get us 20 tabs." Yeah. And I said, "Sorry, I didn't know what the hell tabs were, So he says, "Go and get us 20 tabs." And I said, "Oh yeah." I said, "This is this Gascoigne humour that I've been hearing all about." He went, I won't repeat what he said, but he goes, "Just go and get us 20 tabs, So I went over to next to Bing's Chippy, into the shop, and I bought him 20 Embassy, and I brought him back, and he sat in his car, and his hands were shaking, and he had a cigarette, and we went up and did the press conference, and he was. He was an unbelievable character, in the club, and we were. It was at a time where it wasn't a very successful team. No. We had, I was never one for bringing in old-time players. There are certain instances where it works, but there was a thing at the time where, you know, and I think it was more out of needing to do it rather than wanting to do it, and you know, you wanted that experience. But you know, I was never a great lover of that type of thing, but we never saw anywhere near the best of Paul Gascoigne, you know, as a player.
He had a couple of moments,
Yeah.
didn't he? I mean, it was,
Leicester-
and Charlton
Leicester
at home
away
when
was-
Duncan come back
yeah,
that
Leicester
night.
away,
He was
yeah.
incredible. Southampton at home when he
Oh, yes.
Brzezinski won Bolton away.
Well, Newcastle away, I mean, I told the story about Newcastle away, which was one of the most unbelievable moments. If you ever want to know what Paul Gascoigne is, and we were up at Newcastle and we won 1-0. Kevin Campbell scored, Gary Naismith put the ball in.
Yeah.
And in that move,
Sal's debut.
it might well
Naismith's
have been
debut.
Naismith and Sal
Was
on
it
the left.
Naismith? Yeah.
But there was at the start of the move for the goal. Not many people remember this. Gazette made this unbelievable flick, a little bit like Balassi, but
Yeah.
not quite. A bit further deeper down into the thing, and without that little flick, you know. And I was stood by the bench that day for some reason.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I was doing there, but I was there. And he looked over, and while the game was going on, he was shouting to me, "Mate, did you see the flick?" And I said, "Yeah." So I just put my thumb up to him. Yes, because I didn't want to be involved.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
Everyone.
And anyway, so afterwards, after the game, if you know St James's Park, they parked the bus down on the front by the steps leading into the ground. So we're waiting there, and Archie Knox shouts to me and says, "Go and tell Walter, you know, we're ready to go." So I said, "Okay." So I thought, I wonder why he's not. So I go up the steps, go into our dressing room, and there's Walter standing there. So I said, "Well, Walter, the bus is waiting, you know." So he says, "I am just waiting for him, Al." So I said, "Who?" So he says, "Him." So I walked through the back, and on the physio's bench, you know, where they did the massages and everything, there's Paul Gascoigne sat there, and he's in floods of tears. So I said, "You all right?" And he said, I'm just so happy, Matt, is that we've won." And he's like, "Is that?" And I said, "You don't look very happy." So he says, "Oh, mate, it just does it to me." He said, "Winning's everything, you know." And he was sobbing, you know, proper lost it, you know. And I just thought that here's a man, you know, whose life was about football.
It's just football.
That was it. Winning a football game meant everything.
Are you glad that when you had him at the club that it was in that era and not in this era?
Oh yeah, I mean it'd be, you know, I feel for players in this era, you know, because you really can't do it. I mean, I was saying the other day about a story when I got a phone call, a lady, and she rang me and said, you know, "I want to make a complaint about one of your players," and I thought, "Oh, I think I know who this might be." So she said, "It's I'm driving through Woolton Village," and I thought, "I definitely know who this might be," you know, because he lived there, you know,
The hotel.
and and it seemed I rang him. I said, "What have you?" He said, "Oh, I knew he'd." I said, "What did you do?" And his kid was giving him some stick apparently, so he threw a bag of jelly beans at him, you know, and he knocked him off his bike. So I went on and told the lady, "Oh yes, he was, the lad wanted some sweets, so Paul threw some sweets for him, you know, but it's obviously knocked him off." And she apologised and said, "I'm sorry about that, I thought it was, you know," but that was Gazzy, you know, and he brought a parrot into the dressing room one day, and you know, it was just, he was the most, I've been through some real highs and some real lows with Paul, you know, and you just wish him all the best. And you know, he was what he brought to Everton at the time, you know, was just unbelievable. But you talk about moments, I mean, you know, I was thinking, you know, we must mention Howard Kendall today, you know, because he was such a legend, you know, he really was. And I remember we went to Coventry in the Cup and we got turned over big style 4-1. And at the end of the game, I'm just making my way, the final whistle goes and we're just making our way out the press box, and next minute we see Howard on the pitch, you know, talking with Sean, his fingers wagging, and there's all kinds of, so and all the press is saying, "What's happening, Alan? Why is that?" I said, I don't know, you know. So I said, "I'll go and check." So I go down in the tunnel. I said to Howard, I said, what's happening, you know, they're on, you know, so, you know, and he says, because I was I wasn't, you know, a very experienced press officer at the time, you know, so I sort of, you know, wanted to jump into things which maybe I shouldn't have, you know. So I said, "What's that?" And he said, Howard said, "Didn't you see the kids trying to get to me players?" And I said, "No." So he says, "No, there were kids coming on trying to get me players." I said, "No, Howard, no one's seen that." So he went, yeah, and he was trying to, you know, con me into thinking that it wasn't. He'd been in to tell them off, you know, made them run, you know. So we went in and like he tried to peddle that story into the, you know. But then the next morning, he was sat and we went into Belfield and he went to his office as I always did every morning to do the club call thing, you know. And he was sat there in his shorts with a cigar this big, and he was sat watching This Morning with Richard and Judy, right? And I looked at him. I think we were bottom of the league.
Yeah.
We'd been knocked out the cup.
Yeah.
And I said,
we had Liverpool on the Saturday.
yeah, and I said, you've been reading the league table upside down again, haven't you? You know, and he said, always give yourself time for this, son. You know, to give yourself a bit of reflection. And that weekend we beat Liverpool, I think 2-0. Was it Ball and Caramatri?
Own goal, Ruddock and Caramatri.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I got into trouble about that as well, didn't I? Because when I used to do the microphone as well at Goodison, as you remember. And when Neil Ruddock scored, I said, goal scorer for Everton, Neil Ruddock, you know. And the late, great Sir Philip called me up to the office to the boardroom afterward. He said, we don't have that sort of malarkey here, Alan. I said, sorry about that, Sir Philip, it won't happen again. And because that was the type of gent he was, you know what I mean? He didn't believe in being disrespectful, and you know. But I couldn't help it, to be honest, you know. But no, it was a different era in football. Yeah. It was a different time, but it was also, I mean, some of the times we had, you know, some of the moments, you know, the time when Archie, you know, I was famous for the porter cabin at Belfield. You may remember. I got absolute pummeled, you know, because of it. And one day, Dave Watson, for some reason, unbeknown to me, felt it was a good idea to take the whole 22 men squad right through me porter cabin. So they come in one door and went out the other, you know, and they wrecked the place, to be honest. And I come down and Mark says, oh, you know, they've all run through and sugars everywhere. And so I went upstairs to Dave Watson's office and I just got his desk and I just shoved everything off his desk and put his phone in his drawer, you know, and I did everything to try and just, you know, get my own back. So I was so unhappy, so annoyed, I just drove away and I come back to Goodison. Anyway, 5 minutes later, Michael Dunford rings me and he says, Alan, just had Belfield on, Archie Knox is apparently coming down to see you and he's not happy. So I said, right. He said, what's happened? I said, oh, it doesn't matter. I said, I don't know why Archie's. I said, nothing to do with Archie. So he said, okay. Anyway, so I go over to my office and I'm thinking, oh God, because you didn't want Archie coming down to see you, you know. So I thought, oh God, you know. So I'm sat there. Next minute, a girl from the shop comes up, knocks on my door. She said, Mr. Myers. I said, yes. She said, there's a man in the shop with a snooker cue to see you. I thought, this is getting out of hand now, you know. So I crept down to the shop and I looked out the window, and in a weird twist, there was John Parrott standing there with a snooker cue. He just happened to be dropping it off for somebody, you know. And what had happened was, Waggy was the driest, funniest man you could ever meet, and he'd gone in, seen his desk wrecked, you know. So he'd done the same to Archie's desk and said, Archie, you better get in here, Myers has wrecked your desk, you know. So of course, you know, he wasn't expecting it, but Archie lost it. Just the red mist come, you know, and he was coming to see me, and it was only Waggy always tells me, it was only when they got to near the McDonald's on Queen's Drive that he said, he managed to calm down and say, it was me, Archie, it was me, it wasn't Myers, it was me, you know. So, but we had, and that could never go on now, you know. Yeah. Football's so, but you know, but it was about a spirit in the club, and we had some great times, and you know, yeah, okay, we never won as many football games as we'd like to, but it was a great spirit in the club, and you know, those two, I got on really well with Walter and Archie, you know, a lot of time for them, you know, but yeah, great times.
How hard was it to leave then, and how did Sky come about?
Well, I left at the time because I felt, you know, that it wasn't right for me. Right through my career, it's dotted things where I've just not felt that it was the right thing, and if I don't feel, I've got to be able to love a job to be able to do it, you know. And if I don't feel happy, you know, I won't do it, no matter what. And you know, and that situation came about. It was around the same time as the King's Dock, funny enough, was just being
no wonder you got out.
No, but it was nothing to do with that. It was nothing to do with that. And I felt, you know, and I'll never forget, you know, a good friend of mine who's still at the club now said to me, well, you know, fair play, you've the principles, you know, you've left the best job in the, because it was the only job for me, you know, and that's why I left Sky. I'd only leave Sky this time for one job, and that was the Everton job, and they knew that at Sky. But I left, and it really, really upset me. You know, I was weeks and months in a really bad place, you know, because I left Everton, because it was, you know, it was my club, it was, you know, it meant a lot to me. But anyway, you get over it, you know, and Sky came along, and Sky was, you know, I had the most wonderful 12 years at Sky. You know, I've been to so many countries, I've been to so many events, World Cup finals, Champions League finals, you know, you name it, I've been there, you know, and you know, it was just, you know, I actually interviewed Marco Materazzi in Berlin after the World Cup final when they'd beaten You know, and I'll never forget, because next to us was the guy who played for Rangers, Gattuso.
Yeah.
And as he was being interviewed by a woman, and next to me he just threw up. All over hair, all over everything. It was horrendous, you know, and because they'd drunk that much in the time from when, you know. But it was like, it was the most unbelievable job. The places you got to, the people you got to see, you know, and you pinch yourself sometimes. Have I just really done that, you know? And you know, I've been everywhere from America to Iceland to Russia to South Africa to, you know, the World Cup in South Africa was just spectacular, you know, and you know, I stood behind the goal when Manchester United beat Chelsea in the European, in the, you know, the Champions League, and I watched the slip of John Terry, you know, and literally I could have reached out and picked him up, you know, I was that close to it. And you don't get those, you know, not many people get the chance to do that, you know, and I feel so privileged, and I got so much out of 12 years at Sky, and I, you know, I'll never forget my time then, and it was, you know, it was just remarkable, some of the stuff to, and I know, you know, sometimes Sky gets a bit of stick, and you know, but they've changed football so much, and they do it so well. It's a fantastic product, and I just think, you know, as I say, some of my years there were just incredible.
I mean, how did it change? You know, while you were there, I mean, the way football is not only broadcast, but just the 24-hour news. I mean,
that's it. I mean, the idea, you know, I never understood why nobody had thought of Soccer Saturday before Soccer Saturday. You know, it was so, and I know people might think, well, you had, what was it, World of Sport, you know, with Dickie Davis, and you know, it wasn't quite the same, but it was such a fantastic idea, and you know, and the guy who came up with that idea is still at Sky, and you know, everybody watches Soccer Saturday. Just if you're a football fan, you will have watched Soccer Saturday at some point, and it's just but it's what people want now. People want immediacy. People want information. People want, and that's what communication's all about. And that's why when I left Sky to join Everton, I didn't want to just be, you know, another director of communications at a football club, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to them, I don't mean it like that, but I just didn't want to go there. I thought, if I'm going to do this job, I want to be different, because it's all about being different, and it's all about, you know, giving something that hasn't been seen before. But the great thing was with Sky is that you were able to really bring stuff to life for people, and you know, and you know, I was there when transfer deadline day came about, and you know, I was involved. I was talking to you before about, you know, when I was at Finch Farm when Louis Sahar had signed, and then I got the call to go over to Manchester City ground, and that day then just erupted into madness, you know, and, you know, which culminated in Robinho signing for, and we had hundreds of people outside the Etihad at, like, you know, 10 past midnight waiting for this signing, you know, and that's, for me, it's fantastic, you know, it's proper football involvement, you know, and you know, I think football is in real danger of losing touch with its fans, you know, and not so much now. I think it's getting better actually over the last year or so. But there was a moment, you know, I followed the England team around quite a bit for Sky. In fact, I went to 24 different countries in 2 years. It was incredible. I was never home, you know, but it was brilliant. And it was at the time when Steve McLaren was manager of England, through that ill-fated, you know, the Robinson under the goal in Croatia, was that Macedonia, I think it was. Was it Croatia?
Croatia was Carson, wasn't it?
That was the home game, yeah. But away was the one where it went under Paul Robinson's foot, and like, but I remember being in Croatia, and we were, the Croatian team had just beaten us. It was quite funny actually, a funny story, because Slaven Bilic was the manager, and I was on, we always assumed a position at the end by the corner flag to do our interviews with Nick Collins, and so of course Croatia won. I'd met Slav the day before because I knew him from Everton, you know, I was good friends with him. Anyway, at the end of the game, in the euphoria of them winning, I'll never forget his silver suit. It was like one of those Jetem moments, you know, and he was running up the wing. He'd won, and he was running up like this, and he spotted me. Of course, I'm there for Sky Sports with England, and he starts trying to put a high five up, so I had to custard pie him, you know, because I couldn't, you know, I just had to like move away, because I thought, I can't be seen high-fiving the manager of the Croatian team who just beat England, you know, and he laughed afterwards, you know, because he realised, I think, you know, but like, the Croatian players were out in the car park signing autographs, and the England team was kept back. We couldn't interview them because they were unhappy because they'd been big. And I just thought, you know what, English football's got to be careful that it doesn't eat itself here, you know, and it's got to stay. The fans are everything, you know, in football, whether they're at a stadium or whether they're listening to Sky Sports News or whatever they are the be all and end all for football for me, you know, the fans. And then the day we forget that will be the end of football, you know. So
the Sky hate Everton. I've got to ask it because people.
No, not at all. No, I don't think they do. You know, well, I never saw evidence of that. I genuinely would. Well, yeah, I probably wouldn't say if I did. You know, but, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
But I genuinely didn't. You know, there's a lot of Evertonians in Sky.
Is
you know,
there?
yeah, absolutely. Presenters.
You know, when you speak to them.
Yeah.
Get us more.
But what it is, though, and what I've found over the years of being in this job is that you always want more as an Evertonian.
Yeah.
You know, and you always think, if you're a neutral and you look back, and it's, you know, okay, some teams are on more than us because
you follow
because
the story,
they're the story.
don't you?
You know, they're the story. You know,
That's why today
I always think
we don't know all this Red Monday stuff because.
But if one thing you'll know, if it's hard to say this, but you'll know you're doing okay if you're not on Sky Sports News, because you'll either be winning the title or getting relegated, one or the other. And unless you're winning the title, you don't want to be on there, you know, because it means bad news. But so in that respect, you know, we do. I say we, you know, Everton do get the coverage, and they always have done, and it's actually a very good club. In fact, a few years ago, I brought the head of Sky Sports News to Everton, and he presented us. We presented him with an Everton shirt because it was 15 years, I think it was, or whatever it was, anniversary. So you know, there is a big link there.